Hello and welcome to the 2022 Link to the Past Randomizer No Logic Summer Tournament. I am Other Tom on commentary, and I'm joined by Drunk Future Self on tracker. Have a No Logic race for you tonight. Our racers are Chexhuman and Arborelia, two racers who are familiar names for anybody in the glitched community. Haven't watched a No Logic race before, you're in for a treat. This is a mode that's a little different from the more common no major glitches style randomizer races. We take all 216 items and kind of just throw them up in the air and they land wherever. And we allow a lot of major glitches to make seeds completable. So things can get a little wild. There's a lot of exciting glitches that we'll hopefully see in this race. And we're off. Glitch mode seeds always start with boots, so we'll be seeing this bonk rock just check first thing. No Logic is also always played with Key Sanity, because we're putting keys in their own dungeons would kind of be logic. It also interacts poorly with some of the glitches that we might see later to have keys in their own dungeons. So far, we've got a pretty normal-looking start. Both runners starting in Sanctuary and doing the same checks, walking up towards Lumberjack, checking their tree pulls, their bush grabs, all the important stuff. It looked like a map on Lumberjack, and that's even less useful than in non-glitched randos, so I don't think we're going to be seeing AGA for the Lumberjack item, at least. There's our first key, a small key to Thiefstone. Keys in No Logic are more helpers than requirements. That particular key, we have several ways to not need it. The same goes for most of the other small keys that we might run into, but it certainly makes things faster if we can use them. Now we see our first actual glitch. Chexhuman is doing a Death Mountain Ascent. It's a little clip that wraps the screen here and kind of lets you jump off of a couple cliffs and land at the entrance to the Old Man Cave, which both of our runners are now in and going through in the dark. I have a question in chat about the completability of seeds. It is theoretically possible for no logic seeds to be incompletable in general, just because there's no guarantee that we have any kind of access to anything. But this particular tournament is run on settings that include 2 fire rods and 2 ice rods to make that less likely, because the only real threat to completability is Trinex. Because there's no way to kill Trinex without the rods. So if there's double rods in the pool, then there's not really any way for Trinex to block completion of the seed. You see checking the first couple locations in Hera, and then taking an intentional death out to save bombs. Since glitched modes get you into dungeons so quickly sometimes, there's a lot of concerns like that. Chexhuman doing a particularly difficult teleport glitch to go from Death Mountain to the Graveyard Ledge Cave. That's one of the harder tricks that you can do from the start of the game here, a teleport. Meanwhile, Arborelia, working on Old Man. The dark rooms are tricky with just boots and 3 hearts. It's easy to take a little bit of damage and fall into a pit and die, and then you're kind of stuck there until you rescue the Old Man. But she's got it now. Meanwhile, Chex is doing a Houlihan, the glitch that you sometimes see in no major glitches, but it's very common in glitched randomizers because it lets you get to Link's house from, in that case, over by the graveyard, and it also gets you 225 rupees, which, if we find bottles, our runners will be putting that money to good use. Finally have a little bit of route divergence. Here is Chex is going into Chexhuman. Since this is Key Sanity, we do want to know where the green pendant is. Turtle Rock, which is great news, honestly, because Turtle Rock is a frustrating dungeon to get the prize for sometimes. Similarly, Arborelia picking up the map in Spectacle Rock. On a hope that it's a map for a Dark World dungeon that'll reveal that it's a pendant, and you don't have to do it, but in this case it was Tower of Hera. One of the things you'll notice about this race so far is that neither of our runners have done Kakariko. It's something that's usually put off a little bit in glitch modes. No logic, we put it off a very long time because we want to be able to activate Flute, check Sick Kid, do all that kind of stuff. And there are so many places that we can check in no logic at the start of the game with just these boots. Suspect we're going to see. Oh, Chex is actually going to check the library. Unfortunately, a completely useless map. Looks like we're going to get our first look at CAC at 7 minutes in. It's a little late by normal standards, but again, glitch modes tends to be one of the later places we look. Arborelia doing the same Houlihan setup. I don't think I explained it earlier. The Houlihan glitch normally requires some setup, but because we clipped from Death Mountain, the camera's a little wonky, and just falling into a pit from that after that clip without fixing the camera will get us the free Houlihan. So that's used pretty commonly in these kind of openings. Arborelia giving us a look at the Lake item. That's not a check for later, that's a check for now. We can flip over to the edge of the screen here and take the transition from that kind of awkward mid-transition spot and just get a nice little funny auto walk down there. Meanwhile, Chex finds Ice Rod and Big Key in the well and continues on to Blind's hut. Sorry, a lamp in the well. That's a nice find. It's not only a source of light, which obviously we need to finish the game, but it's also a very useful glitch item in combination with certain other things. Also find the Ether Medallion in Blind's hut. It's possibly very useful if we want to go into Mire from the front, which is one of the ways to go into Mire. Both of our runners kind of heading towards the south part of the world here. Checking the dam, and Arborelia looks like he is headed for... Is that a swim EG setup for Ice Rod Cave? I think it might be. So this is a very recently discovered glitch that lets you just kind of swim without much for collision on the overworld, and sometimes in the underworld, but in this case it just got a little bit of a shortcut past some swimming to get to the Ice Rod Cave quicker. Chex continues to collect keys and also a flute in the mini Moldorm Cave. Key to Misery Mire is not one that we value very much, but that flute that is actually pretty helpful. You also see a bomb juke, which is a glitch that lets you kind of walk past the transition there and take it from the other side and enter the tile that happens to be above the mini Moldorm Cave, which is the King's Tomb in the graveyard. And I didn't see what the item was there, but I'm sure we'll find out shortly. Yeah, the flute lets us get to a lot of places quickly, but particularly lets us get to the potion shop quickly, which, in No Logic, is a place that we go often. It's a green ruby at King's Tomb. Okay. That makes sense. Arborelia checking the Spirit Frontera, while Chex gives us our first look at the floating island via a clip out of bounds. I imagine he'll be falling down to Spiral Cave and headed over to Paradox Cave as well. These are tricky Moldorms in Spiral Cave without a sword. It's kind of dangerous to hope that you can get past them. They can be jerks. Arborelia getting kind of bullied by the boulders while clipping there. It's a dangerous clip with low hearts. Unfortunately, we haven't found a lot of hearts yet. Maybe they're all in the dark world. Chex dodging Moldorm Pro and getting her gloves and an ice rod. That's the second ice rod, I believe. I think there was one in the well too. So we found 2 rods. Unfortunately, they are the same one, so that'll just be 1 rod for now. That glove, though, is a nice convenience item. That'll speed up Dark World access for sure. Chex immediately putting that glove to use, checking grave. That's a check that is difficult to get to without gloves, so it's a good opportunity to throw it in. Arborelia following right behind with Paradox Cave. We'll also be getting her glove pretty soon. Meanwhile, Chex looks like he might be headed over to the desert. It's kind of a easily accessible area. There's a couple Chex that require the glove here. This one. Arborelia trying to kill the mold arms more than dodging them, but still gets the glove and Ice Rod, and will now be leaving Death Mountain to check somewhere else. That's a Fire Rod on race game. That'll be a pickup for sure. We don't have to actually do the race game in glitch modes. It's fine. We just go and get the item, and that's an interesting set of items to have already. We know that Trinex is a green pendant boss, so having the rods doesn't really put us too much closer to our goal. But they're definitely nice to have for firepower, for possible glitches later. What happens if the runners are faced with an unbeatable seed? I don't think that will actually happen with these settings. There's double rods in the pool as a countermeasure against unbeatable seeds, and I'm not sure if there's any other way that the seed can be completely unbeatable without a rod being on Trinex. That is inaccessible. But as Drunk Future Self notes, there is a backup plan in case we do manage to find an unbeatable seed combination, which would be quite the achievement. Yep, exploration glitch is not one of the rare things that is not allowed. Yes, there are 2 ice rods and 2 fire rods in the pool for runners to find. We've already found 2 ice rods on Chex's side. I believe on Arborelia's side as well. One was in Kakariko Well, and one was in Paradox Cave. And then there was a fire rod at race game, and there is another fire rod out there as well. See Chex setting up a little glitch to skip the key door here in Desert Palace. Just trying to line up just on the middle of the large room here, and let the damage from the Nemos kind of boost him over the edge there. And now the camera is a little bit wonky and takes a transition, and suddenly the right side of Desert. He's even kind enough to get the camera scrolled so we can see what the items are. It's not a given. Unfortunately, they are not good. And since the key door is still actually closed, taking an intentional death is the fastest way back out of that area. There are some questions in chat about various places that may not be accessible without things like fire. We got glitches for most of that. It's not necessarily things you want to do. You'd rather have fire, you'd rather have Maria, things like that, but we find ways. There's a lot of tech out there. Arborelia is cleaning up Kakariko, getting her ether medallion, while Chex is taking the flute over to Ice Rod Cave. It's also pretty quick. Imagine we might see Chex head over to Zora from here. Got a fair bit of money, and it's pretty easy to set up a water walk here and take that to the waterfall. There's Arborelia, second ice rod. Wonderful. Chex getting the knowledge that there is a big key on the island. I'd imagine that Chex will be finding his way over to that. There we go. That's a bow and waterfall cave. That's a good find. Unfortunately, Chex getting Sank Heart, that does, which causes a heart refill, which knocks you out of the water walk state. It's a little bit of a trick item to find there, but it doesn't matter anyways, because the Zora Ledge item is garbage, so that water walk is not particularly useful. Chex flexing a little bit and doing a short Ancilla overload fake flipper just to get to Zora from a couple feet away. Unfortunately, only getting 10 arrows for those 500 valuable rupees. But I bet he's happy enough with that bow to keep the save and quit instead of the hard reset. That was a very, very cute little fake flipper. Mr. Bayer mentioning in chat that the vast majority of locations in this game are checkable, at least in theory, with no items. And that's exactly what this rule set allows. Some very, very clever stuff. Chex buying some arrow and bomb upgrades, which I'd imagine is to make things like that fake flipper setup a little more comfortable, because you go through a fair number of arrows and bombs when you are doing anything involving Ancilla, because arrows and bombs are a convenient way to fill those slots. Arborelia heading towards desert. Imagine we'll be seeing the same Chex as Chex did earlier, including that quadrant glitch to get to the right side. Chex doing a screen wrap clip to get to the exit cave for Spectacle Rock, which we call Kiki Skip Cave, because of a glitch that Chex just did that lets you skip opening up pod. That's a map wrap clip that wraps across the entire vertical side of the Underworld map and goes from a cave to Palace of Darkness. And of course, you find the Moon Pearl in Palace of Darkness. Chex will be staying in this kind of weird glitch cave state for now because, as you can see on the top of the HUD, he has red squiggly 4 keys, which is actually 254 keys. The game has some clever tricks that it uses to keep track of how many keys you have and hide that number when you're in a cave, and it does that by giving you 255 keys. So if you can get from a cave to a dungeon, you can use those keys, like Chex did, and effectively unlock doors for free. There's a lot of doors in pod to do that with. Because we wrapped the entire map, the enemies are on vacation. Also, the sprites like switches. So it's a little lonely in Kiki Skip Pod, but it's very chill. It's very relaxed. Little things like the tiles won't fall in Hammer Jump Room, things like that. Just a bunch of locations to check. and not much to stop us. Thank you, Scoople, for the raid, and welcome, viewers. This is the No Logic 2022 Summer Tournament. We have one racer, Chexhuman, clearing out pod right now in cave state. No enemies around. And other arborelia doing some miscellaneous checks around the desert area. Chex gets to set up the most relaxed hammer jump ever, but of course, he double bombs it anyways. Very good. Chex enjoying the luxury of having lamp and pod, since pod is effectively accessible from the beginning of the game. It's not incredibly common to have while you're doing these dark rooms. Also finding half magic, which is a very nice convenience item, as long as you're not doing something that requires having empty magic. Arborelia giving us our first look at Uncle, being a small key to Turtle Rock. That's actually a pretty good one to find. Turtle Rock is one of the less convenient dungeons to make do with keys, so having a small key or two comes in handy. Now that Chex has finished clearing out the locations, he resets the dungeon by exiting and re-entering, and we're gonna see. I'm not even gonna try to explain this one. It's a glitch that involves storing the state of holding a statue or being in front of a statue, and using it to go past a couple transitions. And Chex is going to be in Helmasaur in a couple moments, so just watch the screen. We have a question in chat. What does no logic mean? It is exactly what it says on the tin. It's a Link to the Past randomizer seed where all the items are placed completely randomly. No logic or restraints or constraints or anything like that. We play these in glitch mode settings because that's what we need to do to be able to finish them. Chex working on that statue pull. A lot of things going on, but everything seems to be going well. And now we're at Helmasaur. So that's fun. Since we don't have the hammer, Chex has to use these bombs. Also, since the glitch involves taking some damage from bombs, it's a little scary sometimes. It's a little scary sometimes, because you can get to Helmasaur with very little health. Chex making that Helmasaur fight look trivial, although it's definitely not. Chex getting rewarded with a bottle for beating Helmasaur, which is much more exciting than it would be in No Glitched. That bottle will not only let us check Sick Kid, but also move around the Dark World, move around the Underworld, do some other various things that are definitely not allowed in No Glitch competitive racing. I'm sure we'll be seeing them very soon. Meanwhile, Arborelia has checked the basement of Hyrule Castle, and now the Dirt Cross. I don't think there was anything particularly helpful in there. We just saw the cape, but that's less required than in non-glitched for logic. It's still a pretty nice convenience item in some places. Check's showing us that we have one dungeon in the light world that is a crystal, and one dungeon in the dark world that's a crystal. That's all we know for now. This is Key Sanity, so the dungeons are kind of mysteries. We're seeing two bomb clips at the same time. One, the Kiki skip that Chex did earlier, and one, a bomb clip to kind of hop the ledge there and get to the top of Dark Death Mountain. Check's doing a Death Mountain descent glitch that I have not seen before, actually. That's a neat little setup to get off the mountain in the Dark World. That is actually required because we don't have hammer. Right. That's a very stylish way to get down to the bumper ledge item. Arborelia doing the same checks the Chex did in the same cave state. Just as peaceful. Just as quiet. Not much to say about that. Well, Chex gives us a look at Village of Outcasts. Imagine we got the Thieves' Town small and big key, so we might just see a dip into Thieves' Town at some point. It's not necessarily how you want to do Thieves' Town with no weapon, but there's items in there. It's not the worst dungeon to dip early. There are 4 items to check in the front of Thieves' Town here, and I think we might... we might see Chex dip after the first 4 here, just because of the lack of weapon. You could do everything except the boss, but if you have to come back for the boss, it's not that much extra work to come back for the other Chex down there, so... Check's picking up a pod small key, as we've seen on both screens by now. Those are the least useful keys in No Logic, so getting those is not exciting at all, unfortunately. Check's taking that intentional death out. Oh, not out. Okay, looks like we're seeing more of Thieves' Town. Meanwhile, Arborelia has finished up the checks in Palace of Darkness, but has decided against doing Helmasaur. It's very understandable with no sword or hammer. It's a tricky trick to get there, and the fight is difficult. Okay, so Chex is taking the opportunity of being in Thieves' Town attic to open up that skylight blind and dip back into the desert from Thieves' Town to use this big key to open up the desert big chest. That kind of makes sense. It's a nice little chance to use the big key that you have, because we did get the Thieves' Town big key nice and early. Arborelia is taking a look at Hookshot Cave. There's one check here that is accessible with just boots, and that's the one we're going to see. Check's given us a YBA from the front of desert to the back of desert, which is a neat little trick that you don't see very often. It's useful in this situation because if we walked out of desert, we would go into the overworld and not be in Thieves' Town anymore, which is not a sentence that makes sense, I promise. So, since Chex entered from Thieves' Town and hasn't left, the game still thinks he's in Thieves' Town and lets him use the Thieves' Town big key to open up the Desert Palace big key door, and I think we're also going to see a Lanma fight. Meanwhile, Arborelia is continuing the East Dark Death Mountain checks, and tried to clip to Catfish, but looks like something went a little bit wrong, and they saved and quit out. Might have not taken the transition quite right to get the auto lock. Check's getting us a crystal, which is actually the Thieves' Town crystal, not the Desert crystal, which... Welcome to No Logic. Unfortunately, as mentioned earlier, Chex did die in the dungeon earlier, and is now in the Light World. If Chex had not died in Thieves' Town, then transitioning there would have put him in the Dark World, and it would have been convenient to continue his route, but minor snag there. Instead, we'll get our bottle check. That's a kid who has a pretty good payout. Question in chat, can Chex go back to DP with the big key to get the DP crystal pendant? Yes, Chex. The doors actually stay unlocked, so Chex can return to Desert Palace and collect that prize whenever he feels like it. Yeah, tracking, as mentioned in chat, is tricky with no logic because you can kill bosses and get pendants or crystals completely independently, and trackers generally don't assume you're going to do that. Arborelia showing the front of Skullwoods. Just a little dip, though. Well, Chex Stumpy and gets 10 arrows. This is kind of a nice continuation of where Chex was before. Just doing these South Dark World checks. Probably finding his way to the Misery Mire area to see if... Once we get a sword, we'll be able to open Mire normally, or if we'll have to open Mire abnormally. Or rather, access Mire abnormally. Just a piece of heart at big game, although with Yeah, 6 or 7 hearts, getting a piece of heart is not a bad thing. Question in chat, is this seed being mean time-wise? It's hard to tell. No logic seeds have a little higher variance. In general, they can be very short, they can be sub 1 hour if you just happen to get all the items, or they can be on the longer side for sure. This one seems to be going pretty well. We got fire. We don't have any swords, which is was not too surprising, you know, at the start of the game, but it's getting to be a little more surprising 40 minutes in, because we do actually need 2 swords to finish the game, and they have to be somewhere, but they don't have to be anywhere convenient. Asder with the statistics joke in chat. It's much appreciated. I think Chex is giving us our first look at Hype Cave, which a little surprising that it took so long, but I guess there were a lot of other things to check. Let's see if we got anything good here. Silvers and blue mail are not items that are particularly important for our runners, but I'm sure silvers are nice to have. Arborelia doing the first 4 in Thieves Town, similarly to Chex. Well, Chex gives us our 5 and 6 crystals, which are Thieves Town and Eastern Palace. We knew Eastern Palace from the map check earlier. Thieves Town is a good one to know, though, because we already have it. Chex does, at least. Chex doing a little shortcut clip there to bypass these hammer pegs. It's another funny auto walk, this time on the east side of the screen. So 42 minutes in, we're still missing a lot of items that we'd really like to have, like Hookshot, Cane of Samaria, Hammer, Flippers, and those swords. And those swords will be a problem if we don't find any soon. Yes, Chex has to kill blind. The tournament rules are crystal bosses, which means that you have to collect the crystal and kill the boss for each dungeon. Not necessarily together, but you have to do them both at some point. Chex got the Thieves Crystal from Desert, so he'll have to come back to Desert to get the Desert prize, and he'll have to go back to Thieves to kill blind eventually. Assuming that Desert is a crystal, which I don't think that we know our other 2 pendants yet, so it's a possibility. Chex taking the overland route to Catfish, while Arborelia gets a piece of heart from the digging game. Catfish tries to unload some useless navigation equipment on us, and Chex just walks away, as you do. Arborelia giving us a map check to find out that Pod is a normal crystal, which we also knew by process of elimination. Chex is dodging fireballs like a pro, setting up to teleport up to this ledge. I think we're going up to Death Mountain from here. This is a trick called Catfish Death Mountain Descent. It's not the greatest of names because it doesn't actually involve the catfish at all, but it's from around the Catfish area. It's we get a little series of transitions and clips here, and Chex is swimming in the land, and I think might have just gotten stuck. We'll see. Oh, it looks like Chex is... I think that was actually stuck. It's hard to tell. It's up, wrapped above the top of the screen to the Dark Death Mountain floating island, but it looked like he wasn't quite getting the jump that he was looking for. So it's always fine to save and quit when things aren't working the way you plan. Arborelia getting the intel about those 5 and 6 crystals. Chex is taking the short way into Eastern Palace. That's a clip you see in certain speedruns at the start of the game, but it's quite a bit nicer with boots. Arborelia getting silver arrows and blue mail in Hype Cave, as Chex said earlier. Meanwhile, Chex finds the Big Key Turtle Rock in Eastern Palace. That's a nice find. That's another key that's moderately inconvenient to bypass. So I'm sure that if we end up doing anything in Turtle Rock, that'll be great. It's an open question because Turtle Rock is, of course, the Green Pendant dungeon, and both of our runners would really like to avoid Turtle Rock if possible. But it's possible that the swords might just all be in Turtle Rock. You'll never know. Arborelia setting up another swim clip. This time, it looks like she is aiming for the Pyramid Fairy. That's a nice little setup. I've never seen that one before. Kind of gets a clip right off that little ledge and straight into the Pyramid Fairy. Since that's a new glitch, there are a lot of applications that people have come up with. I'm excited to see some of them in this tournament because I'm sure people have been glitch hunting enthusiastically with it. Chex's Eastern Palace is going tragically glitchless so far. It's what happens when you have bow and keys and all that stuff. You just kind of do the dungeon like you normally do, which is quicker, for sure, than the glitches, but still, it's nice to see the glitches sometimes. Arborelia looks to be heading up towards Eastern as well. She's got the same set of keys and items to make this a nice, straightforward dungeon. Chex gets rewarded for killing Armos with a sword. We like seeing those. So we still need another sword to finish the game, but that first sword will help not only for killing enemies, but also for various glitches. There are situations where sword spins are very handy for glitches. And also just setting up spin speed is very helpful. Chex getting absolutely dead-rocked there. That's a team effort there. Usually you only get one dead rock blocking you, but those two coordinated. That's a real fun thing to see. Not for Chex, but for us. Chex immediately showing off the power of that sword by dashing through some bushes, and also doing a spin speed clip. So yeah, that's we're saving time already. Arborelia continues towards that inevitable sword. She should be getting that in a couple moments, and hopefully we'll find it equally useful. Meanwhile, Chex is headed straight for the back of Skullwoods with that sword. That's a pretty straightforward thing to check. There's no big key that gets in the way, and we have the Fire Rod, which is a luxury, no logic, but it's a substantial luxury. I don't think we know if Skullwoods is a crystal or pendant, but sometimes in no logic, as in Keysanity generally, the fastest way to find out is just to kill the boss and get the prize, and if it's crystal, well, you did good. That's what Chex is headed for here. Arborelia picks up her first sword, while Chex continues through the back of Skullwoods. We have a moth fight coming up soon, with this many hearts. It shouldn't be much of a problem execution-wise. Have pretty good gear for boss fights at this point. We've gotten plenty of hearts, half magic, and blue mail. Question in chat, where was the sword? The first sword was right there on Armos Knights at the end of Eastern Palace. Titan's Mitts on Mothula, that's an interesting item to get. It's not nearly as useful in glitch modes as non-glitch, but it's still a convenient way to get Dark World portals, particularly since we don't have that hammer. So Chex now has easy access to places like Ice Palace, Dark World Death Mountain, Village of Outcasts. We had access before, but he would have had to have gone through one of the other portals and walked, or clipped off of Death Mountain, things like that. Question in chat, didn't Chex get silvers? Both of the runners should have silvers, yeah. Arborelia doing exactly the clip off the bottom of Death Mountain that I was just mentioning, because she does not have those mitts, but she appears to be headed towards Skullwoods as well. It's a natural place to route after you find a sword and you have the Fire Rod. Meanwhile, Chex is checking the front of Skullwoods, which I think we saw from Arborelia earlier. Don't think there was anything important in here. Vanilla small key, is that supposed to be there? Might have to follow up on that. That's, I don't think it should be there, but it's possible. It's possible that it landed there by chance, but gosh, that would be unlikely. It's the kind of thing that just makes you do a double take because, you know, you signed up for a seed without logic. And if anybody snuck a little bit in, that would be a great betrayal. Chex is back in Thieves Town, now with Sword, which makes the basement part quite a bit more attractive to complete, because now you can go blind. We found out earlier that blind is a crystal, and, well, we found out by getting it, but Chex still has to go back and actually fight the boss here, and to get full credit for the win condition. There's also a couple checks here in the basement. Chex cannot really check the big chest because he doesn't have hammer, but there are other ways to check that later should we decide that that's necessary. Finding the mirror in Blind Cell, that's a find. Mirror is not only incredibly helpful for routing, but also a core component to several glitches that we might want to do later. Arborelia heads into Moth, with a similar setup as Chex. Half magic, lots of hearts. Should be a good fight. And Chex save and quits out of the blind fight because there's no prize there anymore. Just a boss and just an item prize. Arborelia collects the Skullwoods crystal. And goes back in for that second back check there. Chex immediately puts that mirror to use by setting up a screen-wrapped mirror portal that is actually in the Hyrule Castle area. I have a question in chat about the prize tracking, and unfortunately, prize tracking in No Logic is just kind of a little bit complicated. So I think what we're currently doing is using the crystals for the displays on the tracker, and we'll trust that the experienced runners will go back and kill the bosses as necessary. While Arborelia is walking out of Skullwoods, Chex is doing those Hyrule Castle checks. These are checks that you kind of want to skip if possible, so it's not surprising to see him put them off until after most of the easier dungeons are done. And Arborelia doing the rest of Thieves Town, just like Chex did fairly recently. you can kind of see how, despite there not being logic, there is kind of a very reasonable progression to some of the parts of the seed. You find the sword, and you do the things that are immediately open because of the sword, which is Skullwood's back and the Thieves' Town back. Check's getting the bad news about Hyrule Castle Basement, which is that it is completely barren of good items. For anyone recently joining, this is the No Logic Link to the Past Summer 2022 tournament. It's a major glitches mode that allows nearly all major glitches and does not have any logic whatsoever. All the items are placed by pure chance, and we have to do whatever it takes to get them given that. See, Check's doing a slightly uncommon routing here, and going into Aga's Tower. There are checks here. They're easy to forget because... Oh, just one check, okay. Oh, he doesn't have any keys for Aga's Tower, okay. So just checking that along with our castle. The question in chat, is there a non-key shuffle version of this? You can play this without key sanity, but there are unfortunate consequences to that because of the way that keys work in glitched modes where you can move from one dungeon to the other. So we usually play with key sanity just for convenience on that side. After a long wait, Chex finally uses that portal that he set up from Death Mountain to get into Pyramid Fairy. This is the older way of getting into Pyramid Fairy, before we had fancy swim tech. He gets that mushroom that Arborelia got earlier. Routing that in with Hyrule Castle is a nice, convenient way to check that, so it makes sense that he did that right after he found the mirror. Meanwhile, Arborelia picks up that blind, or that Thieves' Town crystal from blind at Thieves' Town, just the way you normally would. Check's taking this opportunity to check the east side of Dark Death Mountain. I think we've seen these from Arborelia, but Chex has not made his way over here. We have these two checks in Super Bunny Cave and also Hookshot Cave, which maybe we'll see a hover. Arborelia checking Mushroom and save scumming it because it was complete garbage, and it's possible that we might need to fake powder for the magic bat later. Chex is setting up for a YBA into Ganon's tower basement. This cave is one tile below the Ice Armos area, and a YBA in this door will allow Chex to just kind of launch himself into the next tile north, which is GT basement. We get this lovely Ice Armos, which is now Water Armos. Things are a little different here. Since we're killing bosses in a cave, we get a heart container drop, which is convenient but confusing. We get an inventory check for Chex because he doesn't know what he got either. Doesn't look like it was... Oh, it might have been a second bottle? Meanwhile, arborelia looks to be setting up statue drag to get to Helmosaur, like Chex did earlier. It's a little easier with the mirror, because you can just walk up to that statue, push against it in mirror, and you have the state that Chex had to go through a little bit of a hassle earlier to get. Chex is continuing with the GT Chex. This is cave state just like Pod earlier, so we have effectively infinite keys. Doing a little bit of a swag hover to get across the gap there. Just like in Pod, we can open up a bunch of doors here, and they will stay open when we come back in GT later. Interesting. Chex choosing to reset the dungeon by walking out and back in. This will leave cave state. Now you can see that he has a normal key counter. The door is still open. Wonder what he's going to do with that. We have fancy glitches going on both screens at the moment. We have Arborelia getting that statue drag to Helmosaur, and we have Chex doing a juke past the transition to get to the room to the west, which normally requires the hammer. And the camera is a little bit wonky here, but there are four chests, one of which he looks to have given a heart piece, one of which looks to have given money. The big key of Ice Palace, wonderful. It's troublesome to continue from there with the camera broken, so Chex just mirrors out and heads up to Ganon's tower. Unlike in non-glitched modes, this is to check items, not to kill Aghanim 2, although we might kill Aghanim 2 as well. In No Logic, we have other ways to get to Aghanim 2 at our convenience, so climbing the tower is usually more about the items than anything else. Arborelia finishes off Helmosaur, and is going to be rewarded with that 5 or 6 crystal and a bottle. She'll be thrilled to see. That's her first bottle, which is quite a surprise at an hour and 8 minutes in. This is not a seed that's handing out the glitch items like candy. We're still missing Hookshot, we're still missing Samaria, we're still missing other 2 bottles. It's a pretty slow seed, in that sense at least. You can see the glee on Arborelia's screen as she lets go of that bee in the bottle and buys a potion to go off and do something major glitchy with it. See Arborelia picking up those same bomb and arrow upgrades as Chex did earlier for the same reason, which is that bombs and arrows are extremely useful for glitches, and it's very easy to run low on them when you're doing setups that involve multiple bombs and arrows per attempt. So that's a little bit of a safety measure for various glitches. Chex has reached the meat of Ganon's tower and is opening chests. Unfortunately, just a red boom so far. That's not the worst thing, but we already have blue boom, and you don't really need 2 booms, do you? Crubble in chat asked the same question that I had, which is why Chex reset the GT state. I'm not sure either. That's a good question. We'll have to ask him after the race. Chex wants the item from Moldorm 2 as well as to be at the chest, so we're going to see him kill Moldorm 2 and then hover across, which adds a little bit of pressure. It's not easy to hover in the first place, and when you know that falling means you have to fight Moldorm 2 again, it doesn't make it any easier. Arborelia, meanwhile, is setting up a spin YBA to skip the big key door in Desert and get straight to Lanmolas. She used a green potion there because a red potion would mess up the VRAM and cause all kinds of visual glitches. So thank you, Arborelia, for making our restream pretty. She gets the Desert Prize, which is a crystal, so that's one that Chex will have to go back to collect later. He's already killed the Desert Boss, so that'll just be a matter of possibly doing the same glitch that Arborelia just did, or if Desert Big Key shows up in the meantime, that'll work too. Oh, that's right. Chex did open the key door earlier, so he just does have to physically go to Desert and walk in the door and collect the prize. Arborelia is showing us exactly why that flute is so useful in No Logic. Going off to pick up a potion. Well, Chex does make it across, ending the cycle of battle against Moldorm 2, and continues on to Ega 2, which is just going to be exactly like normal Ega 2. Nothing fancy there. Arborelia heads into Ice Palace, which I don't think we've seen any of yet. Going into Ice Palace from the front is a little less common in No Logic because there are convenient ways to enter from a cave, but it's fine this way too. Chex showing off a little bit by clipping out of bounds in the Aga 2 arena. That's a trick known as Clipe, which saves a little bit of time on the bird, and also looks really cool. While Arborelia tells those pen gators to chill out, Chex heads back into Aga's tower to use that key that he found to check the second check, which is, you know, pretty convenient after you kill Aga 2. So you're right on the pyramid with the mirror. He finds his second fire rod, so none of them were on Trinex, unfortunately. That's a feature of our tournament settings, which is that we have 2 fire rods and 2 ice rods in the pool to make sure that we can't have a single copy of a rod on Trinex, rendering a seed impossible to beat under Crystal Boss's rules. Arborelia has found the flippers in Ice Palace, which is a cute placement. For those of you just joining, No Logic is a setting, or a race mode for Link to the Past Randomizer that places all of the items completely randomly with no consideration for whether they're reachable or not. And we play that in a race rule set that allows a lot of major glitches to get to items that would otherwise be inaccessible in our non-glitched rules. Chex joins Arborelia in Ice Palace. As our tracker Drunk Future Self mentioned in chat, he stocked up on a very particular set of potions before coming in here, which might allow him to kill Cold Stare without the hammer, which is a useful thing to be able to do, given that we have no idea where the hammer is. He also picks up those flippers in the Pengator chest. Be happy to see those. There are glitches to skip flippers for most of the places we want to swim, but you'd really like to have them. Okay, Arborelia is in the room above Cold Stare without hammer. She seems to be setting up for a spin YBA, which is using a potion inside of a door. I don't think I explained this earlier. Using a potion inside of a door exactly as you transition. In this case, with a sword spin held. And that makes the game do some things that it probably shouldn't, as is visually obvious right now. And in this particular case, that happens to put you in a position where you can fall through a hole and land at Cold Stare. That's Cold Stare. Trust me. It might look like this is a very difficult fight, since you can't tell what's going on, and absolutely correct. Arborelia is doing an excellent job, though, melting those Cold Stares with spins? Fire? Something. There's something going on that side of the screen. And there's fewer Cold Stares than there used to be. So I think she's doing a great job. Chex is closing in on the same location. I think he needs to check Ice Tea Room, but will be headed towards the Cold Stare Room shortly. that looks like an item of some kind. I think Arborelia just won. So, congratulations, Arborelia. That's a prize. We don't know what it is. She doesn't know what it is either. We'll find out maybe via a menu after the reset here. Unfortunately, the only way to fix VRAM corruption like that, the heavy VRAM corruption like that, is to save and quit and reset. So you see that from Arborelia. Maybe we'll get a glance on the title screen. Oh, nope. Was that book, I think? Maybe? Maybe we'll see when Chex gets it. I think it was the book. Unfortunately, we know that the prize was a crystal because we saw it on the map check earlier. So Chex is setting up the same glitch, but he is using a blue potion, which does not corrupt VRAM, so we get to actually see what Gold Star looks like. Which is good for Chex and bad for us, because that fight on Arborelia's side was fascinating. Chex finishes off those cold stairs pretty easily. It's a little easier to fight when you can see what the boss is doing, and gets the book that we couldn't see earlier. Wonderful. Arborelia looks to be setting up the same YBA to GT basement that Chex did earlier. It's Chex doing a map check. I don't think. Yeah, the only dungeon that we know in the Dark World that we don't already have is Turtle Rock, which is the green pendant. He gets the news the desert is a crystal, and we do have to go and collect that crystal from the boss that he defeated earlier after clipping from Thieves Town. So that makes sense. Arborelia is showing us that the Armos Knights really aren't sure what to do in the water. They just the last one kind of just flails around and doesn't really accomplish anything. We're still missing a bunch of those critical items that really would speed up some of these checks, like Hammer, Cane of Samaria, like Hookshot. Those are all items that our runners have ways to not need, but they would prefer to find them. I think we're going to see Chex. Chex is setting up for a YBA here in Desert to get to Mire. This is kind of a frustrating door to set up a YBA in, because when you walk through it, the block stays pushed, and you have to completely exit the tile that the rooms are on to reset it. So Chex is going to use a potion in the store, get a heal effect, do a little bit of camera manipulation. and then take the transition and end up in the basement of Mire. This is a nice little way to get into Mire without needing the medallion. He's going to use his desert key there, which seems fine. Mire is a dungeon that kind of donates keys more than needs them, so as soon as assuming that he can get past that key door, he can find a way out. Trouble in chat mentioning that tracking is extra fun for no logic, and that is absolutely correct. Let's give a shout out to our tracker Drunk Future Self, who's doing a great job of it. Also give a reminder to follow our runners, who are both very skilled and making quick work of this no logic seed, despite the items just not being there yet. Arborelia is setting up a little bit of a tricky clip to get into Turtle Rock Laser Bridge from the outside. It's a little complicated, but she did it just fine. She's at Laser Bridge. It's still closed because I haven't been in the dungeon yet, so we have to bomb it open. But that's alright. That's worth it. We'll see these Laser Bridge checks, and then if we don't find Magic Cane here, I don't think she has too much more to do in Turtle Rock. Meanwhile, Chex pulls the Master Sword out of the Spike Floor chest in Mire. That's a find. So I think that's technically go mode for Chex, in the sense that he can kill Ganon, and he can kill all the required bosses, kind of, if you can get to them, which is... Go mode in no logic is kind of a fluid thing. You really would prefer to get items like Hookshot or Hammer, but they're not really strictly needed. It's not possible to play the seed like a logic seed. There are placements in this that would be impossible to get without major glitches, such as, well, the flippers or an Ice Palace as an example of a placement that couldn't happen in non-glitched. I think there were other items that definitely required glitches, though. Okay, Chex doing a YBA from Misery Mire in Desert State to Aghanim's Tower. Let's see what he's got planned here, because I'm not actually sure. He might be doing another YBA to get to Argus, or, yeah, Argus, no. Vitreous from here. Which does appear to be what he's doing. Meanwhile, Arborelia is re-entering Eastern Palace. She has already cleared this, so she must have some glitches planned. Check's doing a mirror door, which is a kind of like a YBA. It's kind of like drinking a potion in the dungeon, or it's in the door, except you're using a mirror in the door, and the game has some things to do for a little while after you do that, so this will resolve for Chex shortly, and he'll end up in, hopefully in Misery Mire. Right, he used a potion to get to Mire, and he used a potion to get to Aghanim's Tower, so unfortunately he didn't have a third potion to do this as a YBA. Okay, so Arborelia did a YBA to get to Meyer as well, but from Eastern Palace. So she used a potion in that door leading from the Stalfos room in Eastern Palace, and that happens to be half a tile below the entrance of Misery Mire, and there she is. And there the mirror door resolves for Chex, leading to this beautiful question mark Vitreous fight. There's some things going on here, but Chex has silver arrows, so they're only going to be going on for a very short period of time. And so Chex has collected... that would be the Desert Palace crystal from Misery Mire. So... he does not have to go back to Desert, contrary to what I said earlier. Or no, yeah, he does. He doesn't, because he got the Desert Palace boss kill from Thieves Town, and now got the Desert Palace crystal in Misery Mire, and that's just no logic things happening. That's just what we do here. Arborelia picks up that Master Sword in Spike Floor Cave, or Spike Floor Chest. Again, big weight off your mind to find that, because swords can be in extremely inconvenient places in no logic, and it's always a relief to have the two that you need. That was a desert crystal from the Mire boss kill for tracking purposes. Arborelia, on the other hand, is doing the front of Mire, the two Firelock chests. Since she has the Eastern Palace Big Key, I believe she can do the Mire Big Chest as well, and kill Cold Stare without having to do the YBAs that Chex did to get through the basement. Although she doesn't have Cane of Samaria, so that's a slight problem with those plans. Looks like she is choosing to clip out of Mire instead. This is a clip from Misery Mire to Tower of Hera. It's a little different from the one you usually see because the wall was not moved, but she makes it look easy. And here she is in Tower of Hera. So we'll also let her open up the Tower of Hera chests, which I don't think she was able to get earlier because she didn't have the Hera Big Key or Hookshot. So going through Tower of Hera in another dungeon state where you have the Big Key lets you open up doors and chests permanently. Oh, that's another bottle. That's a big find. That is her second, but the third that we know about. Chex would love to have that as well, but I don't know when he's going to find his way back into Hera. He would have to do a similar clip, either from Misery Mire, or maybe a YBA from Pod. A lot of different ways to get into Hera and open up those doors. Arborelia appears to be setting up a YBA in this south door here. That's exciting. I think we might indeed be seeing a sewer door deletion. This is a way to get certain crystals for dungeons that you aren't even able to enter from the front. It's a very complicated sequence of events that I'll try to explain best as I can. But the first step is unfortunately to drink that potion instead of taking the transition. That's a very easy thing to accidentally do. It's a tricky setup. We'll see if she goes back to try it again. Meanwhile, Chex has indeed gotten into Tower of Hera and picked up that third bottle from Pod, so he is in cave state in Tower of Hera. Since he came from Pod cave state without sprites, this is also without sprites, so there's a little minor difficulty that there are no crystal switches in the basement. It's kind of a minor inconvenience here. We'll see what he goes, where he goes after this. For the moment, though, he has unlocked the Tower of Hera big key door, which is important for that sewer door deletion. And also, check the big chest. He can't fight the boss because, unfortunately, all the sprites are gone, including that one. Check's doing a little more old-fashioned of a bomb clip for Tower of Hera. That's one of the trickier corner clips in the game because that rail is in the way. It makes it a lot harder to get a good bomb clicker. And that's a clip from Hera to Swamp. He'll use this cave state that he took from Palace of Darkness to unlock Swamp as well. Swamp has a bunch of key doors on the way, and it's very nice to be able to just not care about the keys in Swamp. Particularly since we aren't guaranteed to have that Swamp small for the front. He doesn't have hookshot for finishing Swamp, but I don't think that's going to let him... I don't think he's going to let that stop him. We have ways to fight Argus anyways. I think we're going to see them. We have a question in chat about double YBAs, and I believe that Krubble is correct, that you can do a double YBA with a green first, but that puts you in an awkward position to have to damage yourself somehow to use a potion or use magic. No, you'd have to damage yourself because... Right. So yeah, it's probably easier to set up with 2 reds for most of those double YBAs. We do indeed see Chex re-entering Swamp Palace. Now that there are sprites, he can do interesting things in here. Like pick up these pots and get keys and flood this section, although he doesn't have hammer, so I wonder how he's going to get past this. For anyone joining us recently, this is the Link to the Past No Logic Randomizer Summer 2022 tournament. It's a major glitches mode where the items are randomized just however they feel like it. That there's no rules, there's no logic, there's no constraints, and we play with a major glitches rule set that allows for... Oh, that's cute. Many major glitches, such as the YBA that you just saw Chexhuman do, and the YBA that you just saw Arborelia do. So Chex had a problem in that situation. He didn't have the hammer to get past those hammer pegs, so he drank a potion in a door to get to another dungeon, and then clipped from that dungeon back to where he started, which put him on top of the hammer pegs, which let him walk to the switch without the hammer. That's incredibly clever. I've never seen that done before. It makes sense. It's one of those things that it's like, well, yeah, of course, why wouldn't you do that? But it's very, very cool. Now we've seen him doing the same YBA to get to Tower of Hera, this time presumably to just collect the boss. Meanwhile, something appears to be happening on Arborelia's screen. She seems to have done a double YBA in desert ? Not sure if this is just taking a while to resolve or if it's just actually crashed. We'll find out eventually, I'm sure. Oh, okay. She did the double YBA to get to Swamp, and then did a spin YBA from Swamp Switch Room to get to Argus. I think. You okay there, Argus? Meanwhile, Chex is patronizing the potion shop and giving a substantial chunk of his money to get more potions. As I mentioned earlier, this mode is sponsored by the potion shop. We use their services a great deal. Oh, there we go. Okay. Arborelia is indeed in the Argus fight and appears to be dealing damage to Argus. There was some doubt about that. It's hard to tell what's going on sometimes. Arborelia really giving us a showcase of these VRAM corruption tricks. This is the second boss that she's killed in VRAM. And again, that's an item. Could be anything. I believe that was a save and quit, but it's really hard to tell with VRAM up, that's for sure. Yeah, VRAM corruption unfortunately only gets fixed when you actually do a hard reset with the power button on the console. So that is yeah, I'm not sure. Did she dupe Swamp previously to get the prize already? Or... not exactly sure what happened there. Oh, right, she came from Desert, and she already has the Desert prize, so... Right, okay, that makes sense. So there's no... the Swamp prize is there, but the Desert prize wouldn't be, because she has the Desert Crystal already. Okay, it's tricky to keep track. I'm sure it's just as tricky for the viewers. There's a lot going on with the boss prize collection. So now we see Arborelia doing the same clip from Hera to Swamp. She needs to get back to Swamp in Swamp State eventually to collect that prize that she just earned. Meanwhile, Chex has made a return to Thieves Town. He has checked everything that he can check right now, so again, glitches must be afoot. Sometimes no logic kind of rewards this routing where you use whatever keys you have in whatever dungeons you can reach from those dungeons. So, Chex appears to be using his Thieves Town big key in Swamp? It's exciting seeing these double YBAs. They're not terribly common, because you usually want to do this with Cane of Samaria, but I don't see a Cane of Samaria in either our runners' inventories. So they're kind of making do with what they have, which is at the moment 3 bottles. Okay, Chex's plan appears to be to fight Argus using the same spin YBA that we saw Arborelia do, except he's going to do a spin mirror door like he did for the Agadim's Tower YBA. So again, this is going to take a little bit to resolve, but it should eventually end up in Argus with the same corrupted VRAM that... Oh, there we go. Okay. So again, this is Argus. Trust me. Since the camera is broken, the runners can kind of trick Argus into going off screen, and Argus only checks to see if there are any of its parasites on screen before it enters phase 2, so if Argus happens to be scrolled off screen, we can skip that entire first phase, and, well, it'd be easier to explain if we could see anything, but trust me, that was an Argus fight. So Chex has the exact same situation, which is that he has the Desert Crystal, or sorry, the Thievestown Crystal, because he came from Thievestown, and so the Argus won't drop a crystal. But when he comes back to Argus in the Swamp Palace state, there is a crystal to be picked up there. Arborelia giving us one of the more common screens in this game, this match so far, which is the potion shop to buy even more potions. Glad that we're kind of getting a YBA showcase here, because it's one of the more common glitches in No Logic, but depending on the items that you find, you can need very few of them. This seed benefits greatly from many YBAs. Chex doing a little bit of a clip to get to Ganon. Does Chex have all 7 crystals? Chex has all 7 crystals. That's a surprise to me. So Chex must have determined by process of elimination that Swamp Palace and Misery Mire are crystals, which are our pendants, which is great news because picking up those 2 prizes would be very frustrating. So he's in Ganon now. It is a Master Sword Silverless fight, so these first couple phases will be frustrating, but the rest should go fairly quickly. Oh, okay, I realize what happened. So Chex needed to kill the swamp boss, but he had already picked up the crystal from when he came in earlier and got it at Hera. Okay, so it's tricky to keep track, even as somebody who's pretty familiar with major glitches. It's tricky to keep track of exactly where some of these crystals were picked up. So Chex has indeed gotten all 7 crystals and killed all 7 crystal bosses, and now Ganon and has completed the game. get your GGs in the chat for our winner of this race, Chexhuman. And we do have a forfeit from Arborelia, so we'll see if either of them are interested in joining us for an interview. I have a question in chat. Will Ganon be vulnerable if you haven't done 7 crystal bosses in NL? I believe currently Ganon only looks at the crystals, but there is developer work on making that checkable specifically for no logic. We're joined by Chexhuman. GG, what are your thoughts on that seed?
GG. That was one of the hardest I've played.
Yeah, you sure got to do a lot of YBAs on that seed.
Yeah, pretty typical.
So what were you thinking going into the nearly the hour mark with, what was that, like 1 bottle and no swords?
Right. Yeah, the sword was from Armos Knights, right?
Yeah, the
It
first
was
sword
still...
was Armos, and the second was in Misery Mire Spiked Floor Room, I believe.
Yeah. And I felt okay about going to Desert from Thieves Town and unlocking Desert. And partly that was good because I could have unlocked Eastern, but instead I went to Desert. So later I found the Eastern Big Key, which was pretty fortunate. But dealing with Desert later became more cumbersome, and I don't know if that was a good play after all.
We're also joined by Arborelia. GG.
Hello, GG Chex.
GG.
Well, I was kind of falling apart at the end there. I had to take a guess at whether it was Mire or Swamp, and I tried guessing Mire and then kept messing up the sewer door deletion, and then decided to go with Swamp. And I guess that was right. And ran out of potions in the middle of what I wanted to do.
Yeah, that was an interesting finish. We were kind of surprised to see Ganon, because it felt like it was hard to know exactly which bosses were crystal bosses or not, and I guess we only really knew at the very end there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
And in retrospect, like I realized this as I was doing it, I should have done the YBA to dupe the crystal of Swamp first, and then I could at least see if it was a crystal.
Yeah, this ended up being a kind of a really interesting race in terms of the dupes that people did. Chex, I think you did. Oh, what was it? It was Desert from Thieves Town, and then Mire from Desert in Mire, and then
Yep.
there's this whole chain of dupes and boss
Nice.
kills, and it worked out really well.
It was okay. I should have gone to from Desert. Wait, Now I'm lost. I don't even remember. How did I get to Vitreous? That was a really... That was from Desert, right? So
I think it might have been from Thewstown.
No, that was
Thewstown
from...
to Desert to...
Yeah, I went from Thievestown to Desert. I mean, I went...
No, yeah, you did a YBA from... You did the Meyer Basement YBA from Desert, and then...
Yeah. So I went from Desert to Vitreous, but I should have gone from Desert to Hera, and I don't know why I did it like that. But it got the crystal, so goal complete.
Nice. Yep.
But yeah, that was a waste of time to beat Vitreous.
Mm-hmm. I was kind of happy with my route where I went eastern to Meyer, found the second sword while I was in Meyer, went to Hera, used the eastern key to unlock Hera, and I was going to use that to set up the sewer door deletion, except I had the wrong color potion.
Oh yeah, that would have been good. That would have been good.
It didn't matter anyway because I didn't need to swap a dungeon, but you know, would have been a cool route if it had mattered.
Yeah, and I didn't go from Eastern to Myers, and I really should have this seed. That would have been much better.
We also got to see some really exciting VRAM boss kills.
Yeah, I was really worried about that Argus fight. It spent like half a minute just blinking before it got to the boss room.
And I could have called go mode at Fighter Sword, I think, but I actually at that point I don't think I had a second bottle or anything, but I didn't want to undelete Armus, I guess.
Yeah, where was that second bottle? That was up in Paradox Cave, I think?
Spike Room Meyer.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, the sword, okay, yeah.
Sorry, what did you... What were you asking?
The bottles. One of the bottles was in Hera. The other was in... Oh, where was the second bottle?
I think it was Mini Moldarm Cave.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, one of them was invisible to me, I believe.
Wait, no, not Mini Moldarm Cave, because it was... I didn't have it yet when I was in Kakariko. But,
Yeah, it was
so my first bottle was... Oh, I'm sorry?
Yeah, I think it was one of the invisible checks. Maybe Ice Armos after the YBA?
Yeah.
Oh.
I think my first was Helma.
Oh, okay, Helma, yeah, okay. Helma was the first one.
That's right, yeah. Helmasaur.
That's a terrible location for a first bottle.
Yeah.
And Moon Pearl in Shooter Room.
All right, yeah, that was a really tough seed, so congratulations, Chex.
Well done to both of you.
Thanks.
Thanks. All right, so yeah, thank you for putting this restream together, and thank you to our commentators and trackers.
Yeah, so great that you all volunteered for this early one. So yeah, I shouldn't talk too much, but thanks Malmo and everyone for setting up this tournament. I'm really excited about No Logic, so looking forward to the rest of it, and it'll be nice to see how Fox and Tam are doing. I believe that's the matchup that is happening now.
Yeah, I'm gonna head over and watch them.
Likewise.
All right.
Sounds like we're wrapping this up, so thank you for race, and GG begin.
All right. Yep.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. Bye.